next pages. This is a really brief intro to the video. So today I had the opportunity to attend the Naked Heart Literary Festival, which is a LGBT festival in Toronto. And Kim Catherine Milan. Yes, yeah. Kim Catherine Milan interviewed Jewelle Gomez, who is the author of the Gilda Stories. And I had an opportunity after the interview to spend some time with Jewelle, who's really cool and warm and has an amazing gift for telling stories and is so encouraging to new writers. So I hope that you really enjoy the clips from the interview between Kim and Jewelle, as well as my discussion with her. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Fortunately or unfortunately, so I read the Gilda Stories earlier this year, and I absolutely loved it, and I wanted to start our conversation there because you said something, many things that were really interesting upstairs, but one of the things that you said was the Gilda Stories isn't just a lesbian novel, it is a feminist lesbian novel, and I would add Black feminist lesbian novel, and I just wanted to understand, what does that mean? What's that distinction? What was quintessentially lesbian and feminist, and maybe I'm adding Black about the Gilda Stories?
Oh yeah, absolutely Black lesbian feminist. The writing of it, I mean, it just started because of something that happened to me on the street where this guy tried to harass me. And so I just was writing, and then when Audre Lorde said, this is really a novel, so I spent a year editing it with Nancy Bariano, who had started Firebrand Books. And at one point, she said to me, Jewel, you should think a little bit about how Gilda might be different from other vampires, because do you want to create a serial killer? Because that's what most vampires are. You may love them, but they are serial killers.
And rapists.
And rapists.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh my goodness, you're right. I knew she was different, but I hadn't quite pinned it down.
Yeah.
And that gave rise to me realizing she didn't have to kill people in order to take blood, that I could change that part of the mythology. I mean, I could change all the mythology I wanted, and I changed a lot. So I felt, once I did that, once I knew that, okay, I'm going to take away her killing, but then there's got to be something else. And that's when I came up with the idea, well, she gives them something. So it's not just she takes the blood, she's kind of making an exchange. And that there are consequences for turning people into vampires if they don't want to. So then I realized, oh right, this is a feminist story. This is definitely a feminist story. And one of the things that has been great is that a lot of people who teach women's studies or gender studies have used the book as a text. And what's one of the reasons that it's still in print, you know. So this, if you just shift one thing about how a woman needs to do something differently, you get a whole other, the things fall into place, you know.
Yeah. Can we talk about the fight scenes?
Yeah.
Because I had the opportunity to hear Nadia Okorafor speak in Amsterdam at a science fiction conference. And one of the things that she said was, I want to write stories where the black girl, she wins, right? She's winning. And what I noticed with the Gilda Stories is like Gilda always won. Like she was always winning. Even when something bad happened, even when her heart was broken, even when she made errors or had to leave someone, these fight scenes, she won. So in thinking about how you wanted to rewrite this vampire story, how did you approach violence and fighting and women winning and how they win?
I think in creating Gilda and putting her out in the world, I realized that people were always going to underestimate her because they were going to see a woman, or at one point they mistake her for an Indian, or they're gonna see someone weaker. So she's already at an advantage, and then there's her superhuman strength. But she also has to keep a lot of that in check because she doesn't want to be killing people willy-nilly. Yeah. And the opportunity for her to win a battle, a physical battle, and then still leave something in exchange is, I think, important because it's a different kind of winning. You're not, knocking your opponent down, killing your opponent, or stepping on your opponent and then moving off with a smirk. You're connected. And that was the reason that I created the idea that if she did kill someone, she has to carry their image inside of her always. And one of the stories I'm working on, because I am trying to do another book, is to have her revisit, because she talks about that she must revisit it, but you never see her, or none of the stories deals with that. So in the new piece, one of the stories, she has to revisit the faces, and it really undoes her.
Yeah.
Also in one of the new pieces that has appeared, I think it appeared in my short story collection, Don't Explain. It takes place in the future, and people are hunting vampires for their special properties. And this hunter shoots her with a narcotic. And so she is paralyzed. I mean, part of her is paralyzed.
Yeah.
So she doesn't actually win that battle. Somebody else comes along and kills him.
Right.
So the idea that there could be something that would stop her, I think we have to deal with that.
Yeah.
That something could stop her, really, because she's preternaturally strong, but she's not unbeatable.
Yeah.
Even though I took away a lot of the things that did, like she gets weak around sunlight if she's right in it, or, but she's,
like one of the things that I wrote down a lot, like I tabbed up my book. I ate it.
Yeah.
I ate this book. It was amazing. I should probably look at some of my notes and just be like, now that you're here, But anyway, there's so many, I should not look at these notes. I will get lost in my notes. But, I read it and I thought about Black women, and how there's research out there that shows that when Black women go to hospitals because they're believed to be able to withstand pain more than others, they get less pain-killing medication, or they're treated a little more roughly. And so this idea of a Black woman who's extremely strong, but also is vulnerable and needs to contend with that vulnerability was something that I found really compelling. There were so many different examples of strength in the story, women's strength.
Yeah.
Collective strength.
And I was about to say, that's the most important thing for me, was the collective strength.
Yeah.
How people could pull together and create something refreshing and powerful. And this is the thing that's kind of interesting to me. Think about the possibility of Gilda being a mini-series. Is she appears to be young.
Yeah.
Because when she's turned into a vampire, she's probably 18 or something. And so she physically never ages. And I think that's very disarming for her and for people looking at her. And I think that will be something I'm also going to deal with in the new book. How she physically relates to herself. as someone with that kind of power, but someone who looks less powerful because she looks so young.
How did you choose what age you wanted to fix her in time?
It was really kind of a technical thing because thinking about, so she's an adolescent when she runs away from slavery. I didn't want it to be a children's story, so I didn't want it to be a vampire yet.
Right.
But I wanted to catch her in the moment where she would be making decisions anyway. In Woodard's, the bordello where she lives.
This
it
is
was
amazing.
a time, I know, don't you all want to live in Woodard's?
I kind of did for a few years.
And you know, she would be making a decision like, is she going to go out into the world? Is she going to stay at Woodard's and perhaps, I don't know, she could become a lady of the evening at Woodard's if she wanted to, which clearly she doesn't. She could do so many different things, but she's not going to stay there forever. And so I thought, okay, well, 18, 19, she could look sophisticated enough to be out on the world on her own, but she could also still look like a kid. And that would make a difference in terms of the kind of adventures I could send her out on, you know. So it was really strategic to grab her then. It's also, the young women have so much power, and often they don't know it. You know, they're often struggling with who they are, and it seemed like a good time for her, you know.
I found reading this to be such a pleasurable experience. I found it to be very immersive for me. I loved the love and romance and desire in it. And there was one relationship that I found really hard because the love was unrequited and it remained platonic.
Which one was that?
And it was, I wish I had written down her name. Gilda leaves her, actually.
Aurelia?
Yes.
Aurelia.
She leaves her, and
heartbreaking.
I wanted more.
Heartbreaking.
And I just, need to know why you didn't give us a little bit more. Because I'm like mildly mad. But it was a sweet pain, right? Because and it was one that I could identify with. I remember, like, before I came out, knowing that I desired women and sort of feeling this pent up feeling that didn't quite fit in the friendship category, but I had no words for it. So I feel like I had a lot of relationships like that where I was just like, let's be comrades.
Let me keep my hands in my pocket.
And so that was actually my favorite relationship. It was the hardest, but it was my favorite, and I just...
It's the most emotional relationship I've ever written.
I cried.
Really. It's hard. Part of it was I wanted to be able to deal with passion, because Aurelia has passion for Gilda as well. But I wanted to be able to show the struggle to decide who should be a vampire and who shouldn't. And Gilda having to figure out, Aurelia has a real place in this community. The people there needed her. And that if she were taken away from it, momentarily she might be happy, but she'd always feel like she'd abandoned her people. And also, an interrupted love is always a heartbreaker.
It really is.
It does get you emotional. But I will tell you, in the new book, one of the chapters takes place in the future. Gilda meets Aurelia's great granddaughter. And she freaks out because she looks just like her. And they do get to have hot sex.
That's really...
They do get to have hot sex.
On behalf of all of us. Thank you for that.
But again, they can't she can't really take her with her.
Yeah.
Because she's in the middle of fighting a revolution.
Right.
So
you gotta prioritize.
I know.
You gotta triage.
I feel bad. I feel bad about Aurelia and her descendants.
The whole bloodline can't win. The whole bloodline can't get any. So for at least consistently.
Right.
So as I told you, the channel, I read a lot of Afrofuturism, and I learned this term from Nisi Shaw, Afro-retrofuturism, which is a term that she uses to describe Everfair, her novel. And the great thing about vampires living for as long as they want to is you get to explore huge amounts of history in one person's experience.
I love that, yes.
So you started on a plantation, and I think the last chapter is at 2020?
Yeah.
2050.
Yeah.
Right? So I read this book in 2018, so there were only maybe 2 chapters that were ahead for me. You wrote this in 1991, right? So how did you decide how much time you wanted to be behind the reader reading and ahead? That's part A of the question. And when talking to Kim about Alexis Pauline Gumbs and her read of this story and your hopes and interests in new generations reading this story, I'm curious about what you think we might take from it now that 2050 is actually much closer to us than it was when you wrote this. Right.
Well, first I would say I didn't want to go too far into the future because I'm not that good at that. I feel like there are people who are really into the science of science fiction who are very good at that. And I'm interested in that bridge, the place where things that we know become a slightly changed and not quite as knowable as we think they are.
Yeah.
And so 2050 seems close enough yet far enough away. So I'm probably not going to go past that in this new book. The idea that new generations will come to the Gilda Stories is fascinating to me, and I'm hoping, look at the same things out of it that previous generations got, which is the sense of women of color existing through time, having power, having what's the word? Agency over our own lives and the lives of others. And it's, the Gilda Stories is a coming of age story where Gilda is learning how to use her power, what her power is, accepting it, learning to use it so she's not destructive. And I really want women to see that as their story.
Yeah.
You got power. If you accept it, then you got to learn to use it and use it responsibly. It's kind of like drinking.
Yeah.
Drink responsibly.
Yeah.
But I also want women to see we do live through time. I might say, I'm a child of the 60s, and so I feel very connected to the 60s and the movement and baby boomers. But I grew up with my great-grandmother, so I know we've been doing these things, we've been excelling, we've been struggling, we've been pulling life together for a long time in the past, and we will be doing it for a long time in the future. And the story allows the reader to situate herself in the past and the future and feel part of that.
Yeah.
And I think that longevity, I know it's what's made me feel strong. Being raised by a great-grandmother and a grandmother, that longevity really just, you can't be adrift. You just can't be adrift. You know that you're linked to this past. past. So that helps you prepare for the future, I think.
In your interview today with Kim, you said that your grandmother told you things. I think it was your grandmother.
My great-grandmother.
Your great-grandmother, that she wanted you to remember, you know, like sort of like she was downloading things.
Yes, it's true.
And if you're comfortable, I'm curious about what types of things she shared with you, and now where you are right now, looking back, how did those things that she shared with you, how have they helped you?
So my great-grandmother was taken, her mother brought her from Iowa back to New England when she was quite young, and then married her off to a much older Wampanoag Indian. And my great-grandmother said her health had not been good, and her mother didn't want to have to spend the money to bury her. So she married her off.
Wow.
I know. And I was like, really? And she just, you know, she wasn't trying to horrify me. She just said, this is how it happened. And I thought, what a horrible thing to do to a young girl. She was 14 when she married her off. And I later found letters from my great-grandmother's mother when my great-grandmother had been in the hospital. And from reading the letters, it was really clear. Her mother she was religious. I think she was like a Seventh-day Adventist or something like that, but she was religious. She had no real personal connection. It was all about be good and God will take care of you. She didn't ask her how she was feeling. I mean, it was bizarre. And I thought, okay, this number one, that explained a lot about my great-grandmother and why she was a little bit quiet and we, you know, kind of set in the back, except for when she was angry. And one of the things that she said after she would tell the story about being, you know, sick and her mother marrying her off and to this older man, then she would look at me and smile and say, and I've been a widow for 50 years. And I would crack up. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's the survival story. And she's very proud that she survived. And I wanted my life to be a survival story. So no matter what was going on in my life, I would be the one with that smile saying, I'm 70 years old, you know, and being aware that I had the agency that got me here, you know. And so that always stayed in my mind. She told me this other story, and again, she would just say these things and you didn't pay that much attention to them, but I have built a workshop around this story. I've written a poem around it. She's just said when she came to Boston, she was young, she had a beautiful buckskin dress with the fringe and all that. And that she loved that dress, and she was small, still small, obviously she was 14. She just loved that dress. And at some point she put it in a trunk in the basement and it got stolen, and it broke her heart.
Yeah.
It just broke her heart because it was the last connection she had to her father in Iowa. And for me, that I learned from that, one, if you got stories, I mean, if you've got ancestry that you want to know about and hold on to, then, you know, pay attention. Don't be putting it in a trunk in a basement.
First lesson.
Right, first lesson.
Let's start with the obvious.
Yeah, really, exactly. And also talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, because we didn't talk about any of this when it was the 60s, because it was the Black Power movement and so on. You were not talking about that because you didn't want anybody to think you didn't want to be black, because that would be the first thing.
Yeah.
But really to get it out in the world so that people would know this has been going on for a long time. You know, everybody got all excited because Obama was a biracial man, and that was lovely. But, you know, biracial people, not new. And to me, it's important because we need to see how connected all our movements are. We can't just say, and you got a lot of people who will say, well, you know, you're African American. Why are you talking about that? I was like, because the same people who are oppressing African Americans are the same people oppressing Native Americans and are oppressing queer people. And if we don't connect, we don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
So looking at those roots has always been very important to me. And that dress, and I use the buckskin dress. I have a workshop called the buckskin dress, in which I get people to write about things in their family's past that they think people don't remember or don't know enough about.
Yeah.
And I said, make something up about it.
It's okay.
Yeah, just make something up. And to try to reinvigorate the past.
And that's so true. I mean, I listened to you talk about knowing your grandmother and knowing your great-grandmother. I grew up here in Canada. My family's Trini, and so as a kid I went to Trinidad every so often. And the woman that I knew as my grandmother, I found out later in life that she was my great-grandmother, my maternal great-grandmother. And so I never met my maternal grandmother. You know, I met my paternal grandparents, but they were so far away, so I don't have these experiences of living with them or knowing what they were like in a really robust way. And so it's such a power. But I learned later in life that even though I didn't know these women as much as I yearn to have known them, I can still put pieces together, right? So learning about what was happening in their villages and towns at the time could help me get a sense of who they are. My dreams could. Stories could. My own behaviors. The similarities between my mother and myself.
Isn't that a surprise?
Yeah, so it's okay. And our imaginations are so strong. They often do work that we don't even realize that they're doing. So you might think you're making something up, but the ancestors have a way of making themselves known, right?
Yeah. Sometimes I laugh and I hear my mother's laugh.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, how'd you get in there? And, you know, it's carrying in our bodies the history. It's a privilege, and it's also a responsibility, because then you have to think about, well, what do I leave for the next generation?
Yeah.
You know, and I don't have any children and never had any. So the next generation for me is the people who read my work, you know, or listen to me speak or whatever, but mostly the people who read my work. And so my writing really has to embody everything, you know, from head to toe. As if I was telling them bedtime stories, you know. That's what I think of it as sometimes, you know.
Are there writers who are just coming up right now? I know in your interview you mentioned a number of people. I'm thinking about juniors in the practice who are just starting out, maybe writing short stories or flash fiction that you sort of want to lift up as your literary babies.
Well, you know, Nnedi Okorafor is, I think, brilliant. We were on a Afrofuturist panel like 2 years ago, and it's the first time I'd ever met her, and I just, I find her really amazing. I have a lovely poet that I like a lot, Arissa White. She used to live in San Francisco, but now I think she teaches up in upstate New York somewhere, or Maine, you know, some frozen place. Who else there's a fabulous gay male poet, Marvin K. White, African American, who I think is just really really interesting and provocative and sexy, and he recently became a Christian minister. I said, Marvin, I'm not about that. Just don't let it interrupt with your writing. That's all I have to say. But he's a charming and fabulous writer, particularly since we lost so many of our brothers in the 80s.
Yes, for sure.
It's been really interesting to look at where younger writers are, because so many of them are on the internet, and have blogs and things that they do there, which I'm just catching up.
Me too.
Yeah. And there's so many of them. You were saying how many people are on YouTube and have their channels. I'm thinking, when do people have time to look at all this stuff?
It's true.
It's kind of wild to me.
It is.
But good on them.
Yeah.
I say, I really would like to read more. And the only time I do any reading for just relaxation and pleasure is when I'm not working. At night before I go to bed, I'm curled up with my detective novels just so I can unwind and go to sleep. But it's really, I'd often go back and read other people that I've loved. Do you know Toshi Reagan? She's a musician, singer, really a powerful talent.
Yeah.
She did the music for, the Gilda Stories was a play, a musical Urban Bushwoman did. She did the music for it.
Wow.
And, but she's writing an opera based on Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower.
So then I have heard of her. I haven't had the opportunity to see it because I don't think it wasn't. It
hasn't.
Run
I don't think
Canada.
It's have a full production.
Yeah,
she's only
they
done like
workshopped
concert,
it.
right?
Yeah, but I heard actually there's a snippet of a song that's been floating around the internet from it, and it was amazing.
Yeah,
it was just solemn and eerie and powerful and amazing.
She's a brilliant writer.
That's what I would have. Oh, really? Okay.
She just she was just at in Berkeley, and I went to see her, and she sang one of the songs from the opera, which was really amazing. So I'm waiting. I'm hoping she'll do even just a concert version, but she has so many people in it, so it's really hard to get produced.
To have her here.
She's pretty stunning, and she travels. She has a band called Big Lovely, and she travels quite a bit, and she can write any kind of music.
Yeah.
She's a genius. I asked her, I said, I need to ask you a favor, and of course I'm going to pay you, but I know it would be a favor even then for you to do this. I said, I'm writing this play about Alberta Hunter. She's going to be singing some of her old songs that people associate with her. But the closing song is meant to say an answer to her girlfriend who always says, you don't write any songs for me, because she's closeted, so she's not going to write a song for her. So the closing song needs to be the song for her. And would you write something? And she did, and it was perfect.
Can we find that on the internet?
If you go to New Conservatory Theater, they have a YouTube page, and look for Leaving the Blues.
Okay.
They have a 1-minute clip, and I think parts of the song are in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I add that to this video so people watching it can see it, or should I put a link? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That'd be great.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because she closes singing the last stanza or whatever from the song. It's and that's the thing about Toshi. She can write any kind of music.
Yeah.
Whatever period you want. Heavy. She was a heavy rocker too at some point. And she writes the blues. She's just country music. She's a triple threat. So.
My last question for you is, for young writers, are there areas of thinking or imagination or world building that you would like to see, or problems that you'd like to see young writers tackle or turn their attention to? Can I add something else to that? Because you said something to me, because obviously when you were doing your interview, you were only talking to me. No, you said something. You said something here, and I okay. So you talked about, the rat is most dangerous when it's cornered, and this was when you were talking about, these political times, right? And what we're seeing right now, this upsurge of oppression and violence and becoming more covert, might be, and this is what I thought you were saying, might be the result of the rats sort of getting cornered, perhaps. What's the role of the literary arts in that, right? So what in your view, what is the function of fiction given this political backdrop? And then, given that, what do we want these young writers to be tackling and turning, marshaling their attention on behalf of?
Well, first I would say, people used to ask, when I was doing the Gilda Stories, and they'd say, well, it's a lesbian, I'd say it's a lesbian feminist vampire story. Yeah. And some people would say, well, don't you find it hard having all that political stuff in there? And I was like, no. And I said, if you look at anything that's written, it has a political context. It's coming from some political context. It's just unconscious, the person who's in charge of the patriarchy doesn't have to think about how he's going to manifest patriarchy in his book, because it's the context.
Yes.
So what I look for is writers who are conscious of the context and the politics, and have that shape their writing. I'm a bean counter, so when I was getting near, going through the Gilda Stories editing, and I looked at it, I literally counted, well, how many times does a black person get, killed, or how many times is a black, or how many times is a white, I wanted to know that, because I didn't want to inadvertently send a message that, oh, these people are bad.
Yeah.
I says, and I had to look and see to make sure, because you do it by accident sometimes.
For sure.
And I believe we should be able to do that. And it led me to create a character in, I think this is in the novel, not the Gilda Stories, not the new one, where one of the, oops.
That's okay.
I thought it was a piece of jewelry.
It's all right.
A young white woman is a guard, and she betrays Gilda because she needs the money to get her family, whatever. And I can't even remember if that's in the Gilda Stories or it's in the next book. But I looked at it and I thought, okay, well, there's some bad white women. Let me just, put her out there.
Listen,
and
give us something more to talk about.
There's a reason. There's a reason she's doing it. So I just don't make her like, the evil,
Sure.
But I think we have to be conscious. We need to be conscious about doing that, so you don't do things by accident, and you deliberately structure your writing not to be didactic, but to reflect your political vision and still be creative. So that's what I'm hoping writers will do, younger writers will do. And there's this kind of laissez-faire quality, and that's probably not the right word, but everything is everything. I'm non-binary, I'm non-gender specific, I'm all of these things that are freeing. But we do need to remember the racists and the sexists and the homophobes are still working against us. So while we may not feel it's important that we identify who we are, they're still working against us. Racism, sexism, homophobia are still out there. So be conscious in your writing how you present people, and how you frame your message. I feel like we need to pay attention to that. We need to pay attention to that, and use it as an example of how the world might be. If you think the world is going to work better as a non-binary place, then let's see that in your writing, you know. And the other part of the question was what?
You answered both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you answered both. Yeah. You know, because I asked you about what the role of the literary arts is, right, given these changing political times, and you answered that. And then I said, well, you know, where would you like to see young writers or newer writers turn their attention? And you answered that as well. So you did both things.
You know, it's so funny because as I said, I feel very fortunate. I went through a lot of movements. You know, it's not like I was a movement leader, but I lived through those movements. And one of the most dramatic or traumatic times was caused by other feminists, you know, who
we don't talk about that enough.
Yeah, and we need to, because I am a feminist, a woman of color, lesbian feminist, who wants to claim that because I feel like it's the only philosophy we got. But we can't let other feminists mess us up. You know, the anti-porn movement was, you know, led primarily by two feminists who had a poor understanding of sexuality and gender, and ended up using a lot of jargon to make people embarrassed about having sexual desire, and getting places and magazines, particularly queer ones, because those are the first to go, screwed over. So, and bookstores, if I may say so, screwed over. So that, you know, and you'll see a lot, you hear a lot of trans people who say feminists have really screwed with them, have not been respectful, have not acknowledged them in a humanitarian way. We have to own that and fix it.
Yeah.
Because feminism is important. It is important, and it has to grow. It also, we have to remember our past. You know, the whole thing, feminism grows out of periods of oppression, and there's a reason that feminists have a hard time.
Yeah.
With some of the trans stuff. There's a reason. It's not like we're arbitrarily ignorant. So between the two of us looking at that history and the changes for the future, we could be very powerful. And I really want writers to take that on, so we can have those discussions, at least on the page, you know.
And sometimes especially on the page.
Especially on the page, yeah, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
this
time.
This is fun.
Yeah, I appreciate this. I appreciate this is such a blessing, because I don't always get to talk to the people who create the stories that make me swoon. So, so thank you for writing the Gilda Stories, first of all. Thank you for doing that. And also thank you to the Lord, as in Audre Lorde, praise the Lord.
Yes, really.
For encouraging you to make this into the novel, for seeing that, and thank you for taking that feedback, because you didn't have to, but taking that feedback and creating this, which changed. It didn't even change the story. It started the story. Right?
The story.
This is the first.
Yeah.
The first.
Is the first. Yeah. I mean, and I would also thank Nancy Bariano, who started Firebrand Books, who said immediately, "Oh yeah, no, I want to publish this."
Yeah.
Because all the major publishers in New York turned it down.
I look at it now. I look at
They
this
turned
now
it
in
down.
2018, and I don't know why one would.
Yeah.
You know, maybe
Yeah.
the Times.
The Times. It was the Times.
The Times.
As one publisher said in his note to me, "Well, the main character, she's black, she's a lesbian, she's a vampire. It's too complicated."
I was like, yes, yes, and yes.
How simple-minded do you think your readers are?
Yeah.
And so, but Nancy worked really hard with me to create the political vision I wanted, and to get the book out there and to keep it going.
Yeah.
So I felt, I mean, she and I have remained friends because I admire. I mean, she put out over 100 books, probably many more than that, but she was churning them out. And some of the people we admire most, like Cheryl Clark and Sheree Moraga, and just people our landscape would not exist as it does without the writers Kate Rushin, so Audre Lorde. So we have to support each other.
We do. I hope that more people will. I hope that everybody, but I hope that more people through this video will be exposed to the Gilda Stories.
Isn't that a great cover?
It really is.
I love those little blood spots.
Yeah, no, it's really great. And what is the name of the next book?
Do we have a name? I just have a working title. Okay. I don't know what to call it. I think of it as Gilda, the alternate decades.
Ooh.
Because I'm going to put each story in between the chapters.
So it'll feather in.
Yeah.
I look forward to it coming out, and I can't wait to read it and talk about it on the channel. So
okay, that'll be fun.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.